career planning, that we develop a management action plan, or MAP, to track this important work, as it's a superintendent's initiative this year, so it's updated regularly. And that finally, we update policy IKF, which you have a draft in your board packet this evening, to reflect the new state law. So the original task force, you can see on the next two slides, consisted of 38 stakeholders. It was a pretty broad group of folks that met for 2 years and really worked on the details. Some of these people have continued on this fall with us, and then we've also added some new folks. So I'm going to let Clark talk about the difference between the course requirements and the testing.
So these task forces, the majority of their work was really around the right-hand portion of that graphic that you see in front of you. That is that proficiency demonstration in ELA and math. And so that's really the new piece of this graduation requirements. So we're going to spend a little bit of time here talking about that the proficiency in math and ELA, because that really is the new part of this. But we, as Dr. Field mentioned, we continue to have our graduation coursework requirements. So that was the left-hand side of that graphic. And these the proposal is to maintain these as recommended by that task force. And in the state, these are considered to be rigorous coursework, and those that would prepare students for college and or career. So now let's take a look at the proficiency demonstrations. And so these were intended to be a demonstration of math and ELA proficiency beyond coursework. And so that would show a student as being ready to enter college and or career in the areas of math and ELA. So as you can see, there's 4 different options for students, and they will need to meet one of those 4. One is the assessments with the state-approved assessments and cut points. Another is an industry certification. Another is a concurrent enrollment. And the last one that we're going to discuss is the capstone project. So we're going to take a look at each one of these in sequence. So if we take a look at the menu of assessment options that CDE has published, and this is one that we expect they will continue to update on their website. But these are they have established the cut points and the assessment. So as you can see, ACT is one we're familiar with. ACT Work Keys is really very much a a career readiness assessment for entry-level career. Then Advanced Placement, of course, is one we're familiar with. The ASVAB, which is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. How did I do, Colonel? Okay. And that one is taken by many of our students. The International Baccalaureate and SAT are also familiar to us. So obtaining an industry certification for many of our students, this might be a very authentic and viable option. And so this is very much a career-ready demonstration. So there are a few pieces that would make this happen for a student to demonstrate ELA or math proficiency. So one would be, we would need to be able to approve that as a certificate that contained demonstrations of ELA and math, and many do. Many of these certification programs have significant ELA, communication, reading, writing, and math components. We have a few that we are familiar with in our district now that students have received, and you can see an information technology certificate, one that is about information technology and visual arts that applies to some specific software. Automotive service, we've had a number of students go through that, and then also certified nursing assistant. So these are plans that students would have that are related to their ICAP, their individual college or career and academic plan, and would be a way for students to get an industry certificate and demonstrate the proficiency at the same time. So concurrent enrollment is another method for a lot of our students, and this is definitely one where students might be demonstrating a college ready by actually showing readiness in a college level course for ELA or math. And for a student to do this, once again, it would need to be approved, and we'll out some of that criterion. And also it would be part of the student's ICAP as well. So that these aren't random classes, but these are really part of the student's plan for college and career ready. So you can see on this graphic four criteria for these courses to be, or that would need to be satisfied for this to work. And the first one is that the student and the course are eligibility criteria satisfied. And if we look at the course, you'll notice off to the far right some of the pieces that would need to be in place. So it's part of the student's academic plan. It's only accessed via concurrent enrollment. And the student, of course, needs to receive a satisfactory grade. And that grade of C- is one that's established by the state, by CDE. And that also the student is meeting the concurrent enrollment agreements. So the next slide is you'll see that we have a few students who've received industry certifications. We expect that number to increase pretty dramatically as we're bringing into our district some programs that I think will have certificates, and also the interest that this type of demonstration might create. So that's growing in our district. Also, if you notice that concurrent enrollments are growing in our district, and we see that as a trend that we think is going to increase rapidly, even exponentially, as we move forward. So the capstone project is a very interesting project to us. We know that some of our students will be able to demonstrate their proficiency in ways other than a traditional coursework or an assessment type of a situation. Some students, as we know, don't show their best work on assessments and standardized assessments or even classroom assessments. And for these students, the capstone project could be a great opportunity for them to do an authentic project that has a lot of meaning to them, also is part of their ICAP, their individual college and academic plan. It's part of their personal plan, and would be an opportunity for them to demonstrate proficiency in ELA and math. We have some examples of projects that could be that type of project in our district, and just want to highlight, we have a few examples here, like the MYP personal project. I want to just pause on that one. I had an opportunity when I was at Rampart to get to see an MYP project, personal project night. And if you ever get a chance, or if you haven't done so before, that is a wonderful thing to get to watch. Students put their heart and souls into some amazing projects. I remember one with a student who built a machine, another built a musical instrument, and talked about all of the math that was involved with that, with the sound waves, the length, all of the different specifications, very detailed. Another was a choreographed dance, got to see, and so wonderful different demonstrations that are possibilities. Service projects could be part of that, creative productions, construction of a variety of different things, portfolios of student work. So capstones could be fairly wide open. We've already had some conversations with principals at the high school about how that might be structured, and we see a lot of different ways that could be, but one of the things we want to ensure is that however that's structured, it really is structured to set students up for success, that they're not kind of left out there hanging, but they are with an advisor, with a mentor that's going to guide them step by step along the way, so that they can really truly be successful here. We have a task force that will be meeting second semester to develop some support mechanisms, and those would be guidance documents. They could be things like evaluation rubrics, plans, examples, to really make this something that will be helpful and less impactful to the schools. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Barrows.
Dr. Hatchell, members of the board, it's my honor to explain how we're going to support our students with disabilities with these new requirements. It's been a very interesting experience to work on this for the past 2 years. The slide you're looking at there really is what we are calling our core beliefs around a planned course of study for students with disabilities or students on IEPs. And the one that I just wanted to bring to your attention is in the second column, where we really feel like we want to preserve the dignity of all of our students, regardless of what level they're at academically, behaviorally, emotionally. And so we have such a broad continuum of students in our district that regardless of what level they're at, we are going to make this a meaningful process. So when we talk about things like the Capstone Project, even for students in significant support needs programs, we are working on a training plan for our high school teams that will bring that to life regardless of what cognitive or intellectual level the student's at. So that body of work that shows their progress in language arts and math will be a part of their graduation plan. In our work last year, what we discovered was that we lacked consistency across the district for how to document the graduation plan in the IEP. And so the work that we've been doing is collaborating with high school teams to talk about what should that course of study look like in a consistent manner across the district. And so from a flowchart perspective, how do we guide teams in their decisions around proficiencies? How do we look at requirements for that plan being embedded in the IEP? So we're working on a real communication plan around this that we can share with parents after the holiday break. This goes into effect, I'm not sure if we said, for this year's 8th graders. And so we're anticipating for some parents that have students in 8th grade right now that might have significant support needs, there could be a little bit of angst about how's my student going to show proficiency in language arts and math. So we're going to be in front of this to have a good communication plan and also a training plan for high school teams that's going to happen over the course of the spring semester. So showing proficiency in language arts and math, a lot of our students on IEPs will be able to show that in some of the traditional ways that you've seen already. Some of them can get an industry certificate or some of these other options that are on that menu. But we want to make sure that all of our students have a meaningful path towards that diploma. And so that's really the essence of the work that we're doing.
So on our task force, we had a wide range of stakeholders from around the district. One group that was extremely helpful in our thinking was some of the high school counselors, and they work very closely with making sure the students are on track to graduate. And one of the things that they helped us to see is that that potentially these demonstrations of proficiency could be very challenging to track. And we listened to that and heard that loud and clear. So we started working with our IT department in collaboration with IT to develop some systems that we could utilize our student information system, Infinite Campus, so that we could have tools that would seamlessly do the tracking so that our counselors at the schools could be working with counseling students rather than trying to find information. And our IT department has done a wonderful job. They've already developed a working prototype using our big data analytics tool, Tableau, and they've already come up with some ways, and we've tested this out so that for all of the different demonstrations, all the possible demonstrations, those could be entered into our student information system. And Tableau will go find those and keep that, update that as those demonstrations are occurring. So whether a student takes a test, gets a score that passes, or a student gets an industry certificate, passes a concurrent enrollment class, all that data is going to be fed into our Infinite Campus system. Tableau is going to find that. And so the counselors on any given day can find an up-to-date list of where students are at in terms of their proficiency demonstration. So that will allow them to keep their focus on counseling with the student and helping them to be on track rather than looking for data. So really appreciate that work, and had a chance to just experience that a little bit with our IT folks.
Our last slide pertains to the updated policy that the Policy Review Committee has been working on this semester. We added, the policy itself is very familiar and pretty much the same as it's been, but we added on the back end of the policy a section that says number 2, demonstration of proficiency in English language arts and math. And We also have created a procedure, which is the second document, that basically just summarizes everything we just presented to you in the procedure, and it spells out exactly how students can meet the requirement for proficiency in ELA and in math. So that is our formal presentation for you on graduation requirements, and we're ready to answer any of your questions.
Questions? Ms. Johnson?
Wow, it sounds like we're well on our way. I'm particularly interested and appreciate Mr. Maxon's going into specifics on the how we're going to implement all this good stuff. Because my first thought hearing it was, well, gee, will our counselors be stretched too thin? And I think there's still maybe a likelihood that initially that will be the case. Do you anticipate that we'll be hiring or we'll be increasing our counseling staff in the career college ranks, or?
We haven't discussed that yet.
But, well, Tableau should alleviate to some of it. Go ahead, I'm
The tracking piece, yes, but the area that we've been talking to high school principals about is actually the capstone project. Because the capstone project requires a mentor on staff and requires, somebody to guide a student through the project along the way and then evaluate that. So that's where we see resources being utilized.
Okay, and I have a couple more if it's okay. So I appreciate that. And I've become more aware than ever of the importance of having a high-performing school, a public school district, or, with being in the middle of my seniors' college applications, it matters from whence they graduate. And so that takes me to my question regarding the 4 avenues that will justify graduation. Are those fairly representative do you have any anecdotal evidence that those are kind of similar across other school districts in Colorado as they move forward?
I think so. I'm gonna let Clark answer that question because he's been going to some work groups.
So one of the things that our task force really wanted as a guiding principle was to offer lots of options to students and to keep their options open. So we really have taken advantage of the wide range of options that the Department of Education has made available. I did get to have, as Dr. Fields mentions, I've been at a couple work groups, and some of the districts that we look to as our kind of our thought partners are really in step along the same track as we are. Just last week, I had a conference call with some folks from Jeffco, Jefferson County, and we've got some really good thinkers up there, and it was very affirming that they were really taking the same steps and actions, and I think they felt affirmed by what we were doing as well. So I think that there's a lot of commonality.
I'm glad to hear that. And I'm not surprised. I mean, I would anticipate that we would take these things like we always do in D20 and then put our own really good spin on it, like we did with the educator effectiveness. Everything that comes down, I think we make it uniquely ours and better than envisioned perhaps by legislators. And here again, I feel like that's the case. But I'm also glad to hear that others are following the same thought process.
Ms. Van Buren?
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for this report. It was very good. And I remember our last conversations about the task force's work, and of course we were interested in the capstone project. I expressed quite a bit of interest about that, so I was excited to see this information. My primary question is, and it was then and it continues to be, is the capstone additional work for kids who need to demonstrate proficiency that way? Or will we offer a credited class? In other words, you understand where I'm going with this. The type of kid, I have one of those in my household, who is not particularly interested in school is not going to be interested in going home and doing all of this on their own time, nor meeting with a mentor outside of class or making arrangements to do that. So then it becomes an exercise in the parents push-pull or dragging the child up the hill to make sure that they graduate. So that was my concern in the beginning with, the state requirements. I think sometimes our friends at the state kind of forget that piece about our makeup and the kinds of students we are. They assume that we all just want to go home and just keep learning. And it's just wonderful. and that would be marvelous if it were true, but not all of us are self-motivated and self-driven at the ripe old age of 17. So that's my question. Are we going to be offering a class or an opportunity that brings the kid together with the mentor rather than hoping that we make our own arrangements?
It's a great question, and so one of the ideas that as we're exploring ideas with the principals about how to structure this, I think everybody agreed that if we just left this up to good luck and let the kid hopefully they succeed, that wasn't going to be the best path forward. One option that resonated very well with the principals was the idea of having a class, call it a capstone class. And that would be an opportunity, a regular opportunity for students and teachers to meet together and for the students. So that was a sanctioned part of their time together with expectations, deadlines, etc. So that was one of the most popular options. And so our task force that's going to be happening this spring, that will be certainly one of the ones that I think is going to be popular. And I think for that very reason.
Good. I was hoping so, because I love the language labs, the math lab classes that we've developed at our various high schools to help kids who need some extra. And I've seen our high schools embrace that. I love that idea. And I think also, you brought up the idea of the personal project. I also had another child. My children give me so many various opportunities because they're so different in the way they see the world. And I'm sure all of yours are as well. But I had another child who did personal project with IB, and he, once again, doing all this on his own time. Gee, would I rather play video games or would I rather do my personal project work? It worked really well for him, and he was successful in completing it because his English teacher, who was a wonderful taskmaster, I say that in the best way, she said, I'll be your mentor. And so, he was seeing her regularly in class, and then she would say, how would you like to come and spend lunch with me today, and we can still work on this? So it was a really neat, it was a really great, an eye-opening experience for me in, mentoring, and she was fabulous with him in that way because she had regular opportunities to see him and could just say, how's it going? What's going on? Show me your stuff real quick before we start class. So it was wonderful. So I look forward to seeing what comes out of all of this.
Just a couple of comments. Echoing what Mrs. Johnson said, this is just yet another example of how staff in this district take on mandates as challenges. I don't know of any place that does it. I want to thank you for including the industry certification and kind of open approach you took. That's an area that I am interested in. And it's possible that my wife might be watching this at some point, so I have to say, she would absolutely send along her appreciation for the concurrent enrollment courses because she worked for many, many years, worked really hard at that concurrent enrollment process, and that's a really
Good morning.
Thanks for that report. Excellent. I just want to give the flip side of what Ms. Van Bader was saying. As far as the educators who are going to serve as mentors, any kind of idea of how they're going to be selected, and do they get kind of credit, if you will, for working with a capstone project? If they get told, oh, you get to do this during your prep period, it's probably not going to be the most exciting of opportunities for them. So, and additionally, it's a different skill set to run a capstone project than teach a regular class. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for training or something to, how do you set these milestones? How do you do what the English teacher you referenced did? Because that's not something that is intuitively obvious necessarily.
Oh, it's an excellent question, and one of some of the models we're looking at would be staffing neutral, because we also know that schools are they're tight and they're very careful about how they use their staffing. So depending upon how we arrange this in terms of the credit type. We know students need to take a certain number of credit time or credit hours, so it could be just a class as part of a teacher's assignment, and also would be TE neutral if it was one that students would be taking for credit anyway. It might substitute for a different kind of an English class or a different kind of a math class. So there's some models that I think could make this really attractive to the teachers, would not be impactful for the school in terms of staffing. And the training is definitely something that we are committed to providing. Training, models, resources that would just help these mentors to be very successful, so they're not having to build it and fly it at the same time.
Mrs. Boyd?
All the work you guys have put on this. I'm just curious, in the opinion of your committee, is this whole thing something that is going to improve education?
Wow.
Start going up.
Scary, there's just
Start
a
going up
lot
to
of
pay
busy
grade.
work.
It does. The research and design team, we've been all over the place, and we were just in New York a few weeks ago, and their students in the state of New York had to take 5 assessments to graduate from high school. I think it's a very common practice across the United States that students demonstrate proficiency in the core content areas, science, English, math, social studies, and it's something that Colorado is, for some reason, decided it's important to do now. And you ask, is this improved learning? I think it's really about demonstrating learning and what students know, and what we want our students to look like when they leave high school and get ready for college. And so I think they're trying to set a bar of, students should be able to know and do at this level when they graduate from any school in Colorado.
We have the best learning services team in the state. My short answer is no.
No.
That's what I'm afraid of. That it's just a lot of busy work, and for the kids who aren't learning anyway, they're just going to find some way around.
Yes. My answer is no, and I believe we will make the very best of this mandate that we receive from the state. We'll make it beneficial to our students. It'll be TE neutral. We'll train our teachers up to help our students graduate. And why isn't Parker CMAS included?
I was waiting for somebody to ask that question.
Oh.
It's not on the list.
It was, because you just said C list, and I just said
No.
See, mine.
Well, I can answer. It is not on there because the current constitution of the State Board of Education does not want to put more value on what's happening in Park and CMAS at this point. And we may see that change. As you know, right now, the fourth and the deciding seat on the State Board to see if it switches to Democrat. And if it does, my prediction would be that a cut score for Park and CMAS would count as an additional marker for this. Regardless, we will have students that will not make it, and we will have the very best opportunities because we want our students to succeed. And nobody gets better. I mean, I think the world of Park and his team led by Susan, and we will put together a great plan. You asked great questions, Colonel, very things that we're talking about, and we would make it be neutral, make it a class that would be beneficial for the students. We train our teachers up, and we would do all we can to make sure all of those students succeed on the capstone if they do not meet the other marker.
Sam Maynard?
Mrs. Bullock, to your remark, remember we were in a session nearly 2 years ago about this, and it was quite fascinating because, of course, remember that the state will say that these are guidelines. They're mandatory guidelines, but they're only guidelines.
Well,
They're
you
not
can go higher.
because
It's like being
according, yes, it's kind of like mandatory fun, I think, because remember that the state constitution says they can't force us to do this, except that they're forcing us to do the guidelines. They're not requirements. So yeah,
Well, we can set our ACT at 25 if we want to.
oh yeah,
That's what they said.
we can go. Oh, we can
Right.
go higher.
We can go higher.
Yeah, we can force more of our kids to not graduate. We just can't. We just can't do without this.
The other piece around what Dr. Hatchell was saying with Park, when we asked last year, actually Karen asked, why can't we use Park? And the answer from CDE at the time was because it's only their freshman year. It doesn't represent their full high school years. But our task force recommended that the minute kids step into high school, if they're ready to demonstrate proficiency, they're ready to demonstrate proficiency.
And in fact, they will allow a kid to take the ACT as a freshman if they so choose, and that score counts and qualifies. No, Dr. Hatchell's correct. We kind of heard that conversation 2 years ago. That's absolutely accurate. It's a game of politics, and it's about, some people don't like Park. So even though we've adopted it, and it's our state standard, and it's actually in statute, it's not we don't have any choice about that. The legislature actually wrote that specific test into statute.